Tom and I have been on staff at YWAM Lakeside, Montana for 24 and a half years. We first came, we have 4 sons, and when we came, our oldest was 10 and our youngest was 3. And so they're much older than that now. And when we first came, I ran the kitchen. I came there to run the kitchen. I love feeding missionaries. It's one of those things, and any of us that have led outreaches, we know that a team does well if they have a place to sleep, if they have food, and if they know they're safe, right? Then the team can pretty much handle anything else. If they're not freaking out about those things. So and I've been trained by my mother-in-law, who's one of the finest cooks, and so feeding 100 or 200 or 500 people isn't a real big deal for me. And then in 1995, I joined the performing arts. God called me into the theater department, and for about 2 months, I kept saying, no, they're weird. And he said, yes, I know. And I said, God, I don't know anything. He said, yes, I know. So that was our whole conversation for 2 months. It was really good. Deep. Really awesome. Yeah, you're going to get lots of deep spiritual truths from me all over the place. Yeah, it's going to be great. And so finally I did. I joined the theater department. And again, really blessed. The head of the theater department at that time had his degree in stage management. And then God opened doors for us in a little theater across the lake called Big Fork. Yes, yes, Montana has wonderful names. Whitefish, Big Fork, Lakeside. You wonder what's going on there. Anyways, in Big Fork, and I was able then to be interned for 10 years under a lighting technician named Gary Gorbett. He had been the lighting designer for Disney, for the Bolshoi, for, he roomed with Mikhail Baryshnikov. I'm like, oh, so cool. Anyways, me, I'm kind of a ballet freak. I don't dance, obviously, but I do love it. And so then for 14 years, I was with the theater department. And then I was happily doing that, blah, blah, blah. Actually, that's how I first came to King's Lodge. I came with Dawn Masucci. She was teaching here, and I just came. And about 1 minute into it, I was bored because I had nothing to do. I'm also blessed with attention deficit disorder, so yes. So if you notice that I zoom around, I will get back to the point, hopefully. That's always the trick. Anyway, so I went and asked if I could help in the kitchen here. And that was in, I think, 99 or 2000. And actually, the lady who was running the kitchen, Andrea at that time, was quite ill, and she was out. So I was able to run the kitchen for a week here, and that was really fun. And I made really good friends with Magid because I made him brownies. Yes, we all know the best way to get to Magid is give him sugar, and he's a happy man. Yes, and so I did that. And so my time in the theater department was very good. I brought another team later on here, and we tore all the old wallpaper off the walls. So or wood chip, I don't know. It was literally the most hideous kind of wallpapery thing I've ever seen. And we were chipping with knives. Like, yeah, my team was like, we're going to kill you. And I'm thinking, well, we're serving and we're like Jesus. Anyway, so then I was happily doing that. And about 7.5 years ago, Tom, my husband, was asked to take over leading the SBS. He'd been on staff with the SBS for a long time, and he'll tell you his story tomorrow. But and so everyone assumed I would be joining SBS. I did the New Testament through distance learning in 2001, and then in 2007 I finished up the Old Testament in classroom. So everyone assumed, oh yes, you're going to be doing SBS stuff. I'm like, no, because they're like smart. And I was a smart kid. I was a smart kid in my world. I mean, ask me about lighting design. I can talk forever. You just won't care anymore after 1 second, but I'm all about that. Or, famous playwrights, blah, blah, blah. Who cares, But anyways, I'm like, no. See, I like my world. I'm the smart kid in my world, and I won't be the smart kid in SBS world. And so, God said, yeah, you're going to do it. And so I laid out the most ridiculous fleece. I said, okay, God. I picked a group of people that I knew kind of didn't really like me so much. And I said, if they all pray and agree that I should be in SBS, then it's you. And I thought, there's no way. Yes, they did. They heard from the Lord. So that was the beginning of my journey in the SBS world. And also at the same time, right upon my graduation from the classroom, Old Testament, I contacted Phil, and I said, Phil, he was just starting the field-based SBS. And I said, do you need staff? And he said, yes. So I've been with Phil. This is the beginning of my 8th year, or partway through my 8th year working with Phil with the online SBS. So that is my world of SBS, and so how I got there. And yeah, and you guys are blessed. I hope you understand and remember that you are blessed. We are given this task. You are given this task to study God's Word, not so that you can just sit there and get smarter, but there is a lost and dying world screaming, literally screaming for Bible teachers. If Tom and I had infinite funds and infinite time, we could be gone all the time helping to start SBSs. That is how much, and without even having to blink, without even having to think like, what? No, it's there. So I was called to missions before I even knew the Lord. Really, I was 17 years old. I was sitting in a German class. Go figure. Yeah, Irish-American woman here in a German class. There's a funny story. Anyways, but I'm sitting there completely lost, don't know anything, and God spoke to my heart clearly, and he says, you're going to be a missionary. I said, cool. I don't know what that is, but we're good. And literally, that's what I said, cool, good, I'm 17. What do I know? I'm thinking about boys and horses. That's all I'm thinking about. But so the thing is as you get your studies going and like we're coming to the end of the first quarter, we're feeling a little fuzzy around the edges, right? Kind of feel like jet lag that has never gone away, and it's just getting worse and worse. Yeah, remember that. Remember those that have gone before you. Remember the great reformers that have died so that we can have the Bible in our language. And then remember the end goal. One of the things we do in Montana, and probably, I don't know if you guys do it here, is at the very first day of class, we would have the students write out why they're doing the school. So that when you get in the middle, usually it's in the prophets, isn't it, Ainsley? Yeah. Yeah. It's like, yeah, so it's like, then, yeah, you have it there. That's why you're doing it. Awesome. So you have that constant before you. Because when you get to the prophets, generally, and you're like, really? These people are simply not listening to God. Why am I even bothering? It's good to remember. But do know this. You're not here so that you can just be smarter, or you're not here just so you can get a degree or anything like that. You are here so that you can, now you've known God, you're going to go make him known. It's that simple. It's YWAM 101. Got it? Awesome. Okay, cool. That's enough about me. Good. Everyone has done their out loud reading of James? Good. Tell me some contrasts that you've seen in the book of James. Any contrasts?
If you lack of wisdom, ask.
So there's wisdom. That maybe would be a repeated word or a repeated idea. Yep. No, it's good. It's good. It was a good thing, but you didn't give me anything to contrast it with. So I'm not grumpy at you. You're awesome. Cool. Any contrasts?
Lowly brother and the rich.
Okay. Yep. Rich and poor. Awesome. I probably didn't explain it very well. Okay. Any other contrasts that we see? Huh? Doers and hearers. Yes. Awesome. Any other contrasts?
Humiliation, exaltation. Humiliation, exaltation.
Okay. I couldn't hear you very well. I apologize.
Humiliation and exaltation.
Humiliation. Thank you. I heard the exaltation, but I didn't get all the first part. Thank you for your patience with me. Exaltation. Anything else?
Blessing and cursing.
Huh?
Blessing and cursing.
Blessing and cursing. Thank you. My ears have been super plugged all morning, so that's why I'm going hot. It's not because of you. It's this. Blessing and cursing. Okay. Do we have any repeated words or repeated ideas? We have wisdom.
Faith.
Huh? Faith. Faith. Yes, that's a good one. Good. Anything else?
Steadfastness.
Steadfastness. Thank you. Again, I apologize. I'll just stare at you blankly. Okay. Steadfastness, right?
Works.
Good. Works. Good. Anything else? Something that lives inside your mouth. The tongue, yep. Unless you have other things that live in there. Like, oh, my pet rat, Calvin, he lives there. Any other repeated ideas, repeated words?
Humble?
Humble, very good.
Tempted.
Very good. Good. Awesome, very nice. Did you have any hard passages? We've just finished all of Paul's world. Or hard ideas. Did you find it difficult, all the emphasis on works? Yeah, Rick, did you? Yes, the whole idea of works, right. And we're gonna look at that. That tends to be why James is quite a tough book, the whole idea of works. Especially we come past Paul, and what's Paul all about? Grace, justification, don't add anything to the cross. What makes Paul go nuts? Adding anything to the cross. Oh my gosh. He'll go absolutely barkers. Did you notice anything that referred to the Gentiles at all? Are the Gentiles included in this? No is a good answer. No, the Gentiles don't show up at all. So, which is weird, huh? Because with Paul's letters, it's always the Jews and the Gentiles. So there seems to be no Gentile thought. Yeah, great. Did you have questions about who are the dispersion or those of the diaspora? Yeah, we're going to talk about those a little bit. Is that okay?
Yes.
Awesome, great, good. Yeah, I should let you know ahead of time, if you don't like history, sorry. I love history. I think history is fun. Because today will be tomorrow's history. I used to hate history, and then I had a high school teacher, Mr. Possin, and he brought history to life. And actually just this August when I was sitting in Cambodia, I sent him an email saying, thank you, Mr. Possin. And he's like, do you remember me? And it was like a million years ago. And he said he did. He's very nice. But history is important, and especially the history of the Jews. And I'm not going to steal anybody's King's lecture for second quarter, because that'd be bad, or Chronicles, or any of that stuff. But I'm going to give you a little bit of the history of what was going on. So the dispersion, big picture overview of the Old Testament, they don't keep the covenant. There you go. Thank you. That's your whole Old Testament lecture. All right. Yeah, and as you get in the prophets, you'll be like, really, yeah, they don't keep the covenant ever. So because the people did not keep the covenant was what God gave Abraham, and as you go through it, and when you get in Deuteronomy, it's all about covenants and that whole thing. But because the people did not keep the covenant, they did not keep their relationship with God in their heart, God told them for hundreds of years, that if you don't keep the covenant, you're going to have to go into exile. And they didn't keep the covenant, ta-da, they had to go into exile. After the death of Solomon, king of the combined kingdom, the kingdom divided, Rehoboam and Jeroboam. Jeroboam led the northern kingdoms, and that was the 10 tribes. And Rehoboam led the southern kingdoms. And I'm not going to go through all the kings of that, because that's like way too long and way too boring, and we don't have near enough candy for that. So, but the reality is, the northern tribes are what became known as the Samaritans. And the Samaritans, because when they came back, and again, I'm not going to share all that, but they were those that actually never served God fully. Once the kingdom split, the northern kingdom, they never served God fully, ever. Not even once. They never went to Jerusalem to worship, ever. And in 722 or 721, Assyria took all of the northern kingdom into exile. And the way that Assyria, and you can find that in 2 Kings chapter 18, verses 9 through 11. And I'll leave these up here the whole time so you can write that down. So they went into exile, and the way that Assyria dealt with conquered peoples was they would disperse them, keep them, they're not in their family units, and then they would inbreed with them so that they couldn't remain pure to their own thing. So I'm in the land of Harry Potter. This northern kingdom were mudbloods. That's what they were. So, yeah. And if you hate Harry Potter, I'm sorry. And I don't worship Satan because I've read his books. So. So, I did have one lady said that. Like, really? How could you mention him? Don't you know they worship Satan? I'm like, wow, thank you for sharing that. But it's okay. Then, okay, so the northern kingdom was gone, never to come back, ever, ever, ever. So those are some of the dispersion. Then in Babylon rose as a power, and so all that was left was the southern kingdom. And then there were 3 exiles from Babylon. In 605, which you'll find that mentioned in Daniel 1:1. I know it's mentioned in 2 Kings. Nothing in my brain. Couldn't think of it at all. So I'm like going, ugh. You ever have that where it's like, okay, I know this, I've taught this. Yeah, there's nothing there. So 605. Then 597, the exile, and that was in 2 Kings 24:12 through 16. And then the final, the destruction of Jerusalem in 586. And this is all, of course, BC. And that's in 2 Kings 25. Because, again, they did not keep the covenant. God said you must keep the covenant. These sorts of things. So these, but the way that Babylon did it was they kept them in their units. They kept the peoples that they conquered, so they'd be worshiping their gods. They were able to do that. And so they were able to remain pure. So those were also people of the dispersion. And then also after the stoning of Stephen in Acts 8, verses 1 and 2, it talks about how after Stephen was stoned, there was great persecution and the church was dispersed. The Jews were dispersed throughout. So those are all the ones that would be the dispersion. Now, where were they in the world? Well, kind of everywhere. They were all throughout, of course, the Roman Empire here. Sorry, I walked way far away, David. And then Egypt, Northern Europe, Northern Africa, I'm sorry, throughout the Middle East and all the Roman Empire. That's where the dispersion went to. Now, some of the things that they were dealing with, being the Jews of the dispersion, whether if it's from long, long ago or whether if it's fairly, within one generation, is they were struggling with a lot of things. They were struggling with identity. Who am I? Where do I belong? It's written to the 12 tribes. Those were, the 12 sons of Jacob, to be known as Israel. But they weren't part. Jerusalem was the center of their worship, the center of their identity. So they didn't have that. They weren't, they were too far away to make it to Jerusalem for these things. They weren't able to come to the temple. They lived among Gentiles, which they called dogs. Now, these are Jewish believers. They believe in Jesus. It says, and we'll get into the text. They were Jewish believers, but living among strangers. We've got quite a few nationalities in this room. Are there certain things you miss from home? I mean, England is awesome and amazing, but what do you miss from home? Tell me some of the things that you miss from your homeland. Huh? Nothing. Everything's great. Awesome. Cool. Food. Yeah, the food. Yeah.
The weather.
The weather. Yes. Yeah. They always laugh at us Americans because we usually carry a jar of peanut butter with us. It's like, it's not that we all love it that much. It's just like, hi, I can carry it home in a bottle. It's like, I've got this. It's great. Like, our youngest son would always carry his blankie with him. It's just like, he's like, okay. He's like, I feel like I'm taking a little bit of home with me. I'm like, okay, if a little green rag will do it for you, I'm okay. We all need something. But when we're in a different land, it's just different. Life is different. When we go on outreach, things that are like, oh, look. a proper fish and chips place. Yay, God's story. You know, here we are. You know, we've got proper things that we really love, and that's where the dispersion. They had and because they accepted Jesus, they weren't welcome in the synagogue. Not a real fan of like, hey, cool, Jesus died on the cross for my sins. Oh yeah, you guys all killed him. That's not okay. We're just gonna back up now. We're out of here, you know. So they couldn't go to synagogue. They weren't able to. So all these changes were going on. And so that I just want us. We'll be talking a lot about being in the shoes of the original reader. These are Jews that believe in Jesus. These are Jews that were dispersed, whether if it's from a long time ago or fairly recent. These are Jews that are struggling with a lot of things, and we're going to talk about the author a little bit too, and why they should listen to him and what's going on there. Cool. Yes?
So is it for sure is not that the audience is just Jews?
It is, yes.
I read a reference about chapter 5. It could be.
Yeah, I saw that too, but that's one of those kind of out there references. I'd say 97 to 98% of all sources say it's written primarily to Jews. Now it applies to Gentiles, which is always good, but it's written primarily, but it's to the 12 tribes of the dispersion and stuff like that. So the truths apply to the Gentiles. But yeah, I had read that too, and I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. Yes. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
That's why you were explaining about this Old Testament a little bit of background. Northern Israel.
Yes,
Southeast
because
Israel,
they became when Assyria was conquered and Cyrus, king of Persia, allowed the Jews to go back in 536 BC. Then by that time the mudbloods, those that had gone to Assyria, they were already back in the land too, and so they were called Samaritans because Samaria was their capital. Yes.
Is the evidence coming from the 12 tribes?
Uh-huh. They were part of the 12 tribes. Yeah. Because when the nation split after Solomon died, 10 tribes were part of the northern kingdom, which were these guys. 2 tribes were part of the southern kingdom.
Are they considered as the Gentiles, even the 10 tribes in the north? I mean, they're not Gentiles, but...
They're not true Jews. Yeah. Yeah. The Jews did not consider them true Jews. And so remember when Jesus was sitting and talking to the Samaritan woman at the well? And she said, yeah, you Jews say we must worship at the temple, but our fathers say we can worship on the mountain. She was referring to that whole split and that whole thing. And so the Samaritans didn't consider themselves true Jews either. But it's part of the dispersion. And of course, when it split, there were faithful ones that said, of different tribes that said, we're going to worship at the temple. I mean, it wasn't cut down the middle, okay, if you're not, Levi and Judah, the rest of you guys have to go bye-bye. No, there were some that stayed there, but it was written to all these that would be part of it, because they were part of the whole thing. Now, we also know from Paul in Romans that true Israel is all of us, right? We know that, right? That's a good thing. Okay, good. Awesome. Cool. But yeah, so I'm just giving you the options for all the different, who the dispersion people could be. And it could be all these guys. So some sources just say it's these guys after the stoning of Stephen. But I like to include the rest because it doesn't say it's not these guys. So yeah. Yeah, but I know chapter 5, in that it was one of those things, but most of the sources say the book is primarily written to Jews.
I mean, reading it, I don't really think, it's not clear at all.
No, it isn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. So, and if you want to go to a mixed audience, I mean, I don't think you'll die and go to hell or anything. It's okay. You're good. You're an inductive student. You can put whatever you want. Cool. We're going to talk a little bit about the author. There's a bunch of different guys called James and that show up in the Bible. And I have great handouts. Right, okay, cool. Yeah. And I'll leave these for you guys if you want to copy them. That's cool. That way I won't crinkle them too. Okay, so there was James, the son of Zebedee, right? He's the brother of John. Now we know in the book of Acts what happened to him around chapter 6, 5. Yeah, he was the first martyr. So probably not super likely that he wrote this book, because he was killed in 44, roughly 44 AD. So the church would have been really, really, really small. And also, this hadn't happened yet, after the stoning of Stephen. Okay? Then we have another apostle called James, the son of Alphaeus. Yeah, there's literally nothing known about him. I'm sure he's a good guy. He was an apostle. He probably did lots of things, but he's not really mentioned. Then it mentions that there's James, the father of Judas, who wasn't Iscariot. When they give the list of the apostles, there's James, Judas, not Iscariot, the son of James. Yeah, it would be kind of weirdly illogical that this random father of Judas, not Iscariot, would write this. And then there's James, the brother of Jesus. And again, it's on the handout, and you can make copies, and you guys can have this. So common thought is that it's that James, the brother of the Lord. And so that sort of a thing, that would be good. I kind of go with that as well. But if you want to go with the other James, I mean, you're okay. Just remember, as inductive students, you have to back it up with Scripture. You know. And there is, I heard a teaching, an SPS teaching, where they thought it was James, the brother of John, that had written it. And his lecture kind of fell apart in about an hour. But that's okay. It was his thought, and it was okay. And he loves Jesus, and we're all good. So, a little bit about James. James, the brother of the Lord. I'm going to kind of go from that viewpoint, because I have to pick one, right? So I'm going to go with James, the brother of the Lord. Interesting thing, as we know through the Gospels, when Jesus was walking around and all happy before he died on the cross, none of his brothers and sisters believed in him. Well, and also think about this. Your oldest brother is God. Literally. Yeah. Who can't you blame anything on? Jesus. Mom would say, okay, who broke this? Not Jesus. So it must be one of us. And, you know. I mean, imagine this. I mean, just put yourself in the place. Do you have this? How many of you are oldest children? Oh, I'm sorry, you have a question. Yes.
So you're telling, as James is a brother of the Lord, which is his younger brother.
Jesus is his older brother, yeah. Jesus is number one son. She was a virgin when she had him.
Yeah, but, okay.
No, it's okay, because there's other thoughts. There's the Anglican thought or the Roman Catholic thought that, yeah. Yeah, there's other thoughts that sort of thing, that it was actually, that James was like children of Joseph before he married Mary. There's that thought. And that's fine. There's no scripture for that. But that is a thought. Also, the Roman Catholic thought is that Mary and Joseph never did things that they could have children with. So James and Jude and stuff were his cousins.
That was my son. Not cousin, but
Nephews, cousins, like some sort of relative, yeah. The general Protestant thought is that Jesus had siblings, because it talks about where his mother came with his brothers and sisters, yeah. So, which is okay. If you hold to the other thought, still same. Somebody that knew Jesus growing up, either stepbrothers or whatever. Still, the idea of having a sibling or a relative that's God. Irritating. Yeah. Still yeah. And they're not really going to accept you too well. You know, like growing up, or whatever stance you take with it, growing up, it's like, so who knows the answer besides Jesus? So who doesn't ever do anything wrong besides Jesus? You know, heck, he didn't even get in trouble when he left his family in Jerusalem for, when he was 12 and they found him in the temple. He didn't get in trouble. Why? Because he's Jesus. Mom and Dad said, so what are you doing here? He's like, well, I'm about my Father's business. Oh, okay, that makes perfect sense. So again, I want to, sometimes we read these things like, oh yes, they're very spiritual. No, they were just people like us. Who of us are the oldest in the family? Yeah, who of us are the youngest in the family? Yeah, so the youngest. Did you get blamed for everything? No, you get away with everything as a baby? Yeah, youngest child's always get away. I know. My baby brother, he got away with literally everything. Like, of course, we would, like, one of the things I do is I'm my oldest, and I'm the only girl. And so my baby brother, I just didn't like him, like, ever. And so he's learning to walk, so I just push him down all the time. So then he learned how to bite. He got teeth. So then he'd hang on to a corner or something, and he'd just wait for me to come by, and he'd bite me as hard as he could. Yes, I'd be screaming, "Mom, Ron bit me!" And she's like, "He's the baby." I'm like, "Yes, of course he is." Awesome. So you've had that sibling, right, where you're just the one that never gets caught with anything. They're just, yeah. And so imagine that person saying, "Oh, by the way, I'm the creator of the universe, and I'm going to be dying on the cross for your sins, and if you care to worship me, you can." Yeah, it's not going to go over so good. I've read different commentaries on how, obviously, James, this couldn't have been the brother or any sort of relative of Jesus, because why wouldn't he have worshipped Jesus? I'm like, why would he have? Until he's dead, and then you see, oh, my dead brother is walking around, glorified, and rising up, then that kind of tends to make you change your thought a little bit. Like, yeah, remember when we were at his funeral, and no, he's not dead. That's crazy. So that sort of stuff really, yeah, So James is some sort of a relative of the Lord. And again, if you hold to the other views, not being a brother doesn't change the impact at all. Totally fine. Totally fine. Church tradition has lots of different thoughts, and that's okay. But he was called James the Just. He was called, there's lots of interesting things you can find out about him if you've done your BRI. There's some really weird stuff. They said that he was so just because church tradition holds, and this isn't scripture, this is church tradition holds, that he never bathed. Never. So I would call him James the Stinky. So what do we do as SBS students? We do not follow that example. No, we take baths and showers. They said that he was a Nazarite from birth, so that he never cut his hair, he never drank anything from the grape or anything like that. And they said that his knees were as hard as camels' knees because he was in prayer so much. And that is held, Josephus mentions that as well as church tradition, that he was a man of great prayer. He shows up, of course, in Acts 15 as the head of the Jerusalem Council. So he is the leader of the church in Jerusalem. And church tradition and history doesn't show that he ever left Jerusalem, that he was just there. Which you can see, he would be greatly respected, having known the Lord intimately, close relationship there. But yeah, he was a man held in high respect. He wasn't one of the original 12 apostles, but he was considered an apostle because obviously he walked with the Lord. He knew the Lord. Same as Paul. He knew the Lord through different ways. So that's a little bit about him. And so if you go with James the Just, and again, you can go with the other James. You can, but I have to pick a way, so I'm going to go with this one. If you go with James being the author, James the Just, James the relative of the Lord, then the dating of the book would have to be somewhere between 48-ish, and he was killed in 62. Now his death is an interesting one. And this, there's an eyewitness report by me and my Latin, Haegius, Haeggius, but also it's backed up by Josephus. Haegius was there, Josephus was a historian. But he said that it was on a particular day that the leaders of the temple took James the Just up to the top of the temple, kind of up to the rooftop. And they were hoping that they could get him to deny that Jesus was the Lord. And so they yelled up to him, "Sir, will you tell us that this Jesus of Nazareth show us that tell us he is the Christ, the Messiah." And of course, James took that opportunity to completely preach the entire gospel and share that, indeed Jesus is God. And so they threw him off the top. It was a good 30, 40-foot fall, and he didn't die. And so then because he didn't die, then they started stoning him with stones. And according to Josephus, he died from those. According to Hegius, who was there watching, he didn't die from that. And so a fuller, a man who did laundry, they had these big clubs that they would, work the laundry with. He beat him to death until his brains came out. And that was in 62 AD. So we know that the book, if we go with this James being the author, we know that it can't be written after 62. But he really wasn't, the church wasn't super formulated and things like that, where he was a recognized leader till roughly around 48. So sometime in there would be the writing of this book. There are some people that think that maybe it was somebody that wasn't even named James, just someone wanting to be super important, and so they would do this. People would write letters in the name of somebody else that was kind of important. And so those people would put the dating of the book in like the 100s, after all the apostles were dead and everything. But I kind of don't think it was that. So, yeah. Some reason that some people think that it was written earlier, before the Jerusalem Council in 49, was because it doesn't mention the Gentiles. Okay. But then some people that say it was written after 49 is because it doesn't mention the Gentiles. Because it's already been dealt with. So it's like the same argument used for early dating or later dating. And you can do your BRI and come to your own conclusion on that. Yes. Good. Any questions so far? Yes?
How is education like for rather poor and uneducated families? Because if James was the brother of Jesus, he was a carpenter's son.
Right.
And St. Peter, so where did they get the knowledge from? Did they get taught them?
Right. There was always Jewish boys always had to go to Hebrew school. Even today, they have to go to Hebrew school, and they would learn from a rabbi. And so, because by age 5 they had to have the book of Leviticus memorized, and then by age 13 they had to have all of what we know as the Old Testament committed to memory. So they went to class. Whether if they're rich or poor or whatever. If you're richer, like Paul came from a rich family, so he studied under Gamaliel, the best of the best. But yeah, so they would know these things because they couldn't have their bar mitzvah. They couldn't become men at 13 unless they knew these things. Yeah. Does that help? Okay, awesome. Cool. You have a question. You have a quizzical face. You're good?
I'm just thinking of Paul's speech in Antioch.
Uh-huh.
And how relevant it is to the day, because the book talks about justification.
Mm-hmm.
So James must have heard of this.
Or you knew of it was a known thing. Yeah. It could have, and you can go with that. That's a good question. And again, being inductive students, take that and go with it as long as Scripture backs it up. Yeah, you sure can. And either date is okay. Earlier or later is okay. It doesn't change the impact of the book at all. It doesn't change the message at all. No. And I'm not really sold on either. I used to be. Actually, 3 days ago, I was really firm. I sat there in L.A. talking with Ilva. She's had SBS staff there. And I said, yep, I'm late date, man. This is it. I'm all about the late date, and this is the way it goes. And then I was doing more research on it. Or it could be an early date. It could be, whatever. Somewhere around there. Yeah, the whole thing with justification, in Antioch, yeah, they brought that. But also it had been, it did come from the same source, Jesus. So, yeah. So it's a good argument, and take that as far as you want. Yep, just pick one. But it doesn't change the message at all. It's good. So yeah, I'm still waffling. Yes, Darren.
The name of James.
Yes.
What I know and what I heard from the Jewish guy was actually James' name wasn't James. Actually, it's
Jacob.
Jacob.
Yeah, it's the Greek form of Jacob.
James is Greek form of Jacob.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. Is that a problem for you, or?
No.
Okay,
I
okay.
just want
You can call him
to hear
Jacob,
where
it's
James
cool.
came from.
Oh, no, it's just the Greek form of Jacob. And because Greek was the common language. at the time.
Because I heard the name of the Jacob is given to the person who like leadership or
Could be, or not. Yeah, it could be. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm fully a Gentile. No idea. But James is the Greek form of Jacob. Yeah. Yeah.
What was your name in Greek?
Yep. Because Greek was the language of the day. Thanks to Alexander the Great in 332, he Greeked the world. So that's why the gospel was able to go through the world so fast. Everybody spoke the same language. Yeah. Good, good. Shall we get in the text a little bit? Should we have some fun? Okay, cool. Awesome. And I'll leave these up here because I want to make sure that we cover things. All right. Well, let's have somebody read verse 1 of chapter 1.
James, the servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes in the dispersion.
Good. Greetings. I'm sorry, cut off your greetings. That was so rude. I apologize. Okay, cool. So I don't know if in your color coding of your Bible, if you do color code of BRIs, but wow, it's super handy. And if you don't, it'd be a cool thing you could start today. Because then when you go to do your VRI, ta-da, it's got its own thing. For me, it's always black underline. I recolor code every time I teach, so because I like it. Anyways, so yeah, we've already covered that. James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes of the dispersion. Okay, good. Who is this written to? The 12 tribes. Yes. Awesome. All right, let's read. Somebody read verses 2 through 4. Okay, tell me what's the original reader going through? Trials, right? They have trials of various kinds, right? And their faith is being tested, correct? So they're facing some sort of test. They're facing some sort of trials. So again, yes, go for it. I was done. You can ask. Okay, cool. So anyway, so there's something that's been testing their faith. There's some sort of trials that they've been going through. We don't know. It never tells us fully, but that the writer tells them, endure this. Hold on. Keep going. So again, that's great BRI information to know. Okay, because if we lose track of that, then some of this stuff seems kind of goofy. But we need to bear in mind that they're facing some sort of trials. They're facing some sort of testing of their faith. What is it? Could be anything. I mean, that's why I laid out some of the little bit of the historical background stuff. You know, it could be as simple as, you know what, they're not allowed to keep some of the festivals. Or they're not allowed to, they can't go to temple anymore. Or they can't, go to synagogue, things like that. Because one of the things that we have to understand is at that time, the Jews did not like the Christians at all. Not a bit. And to this day, it is not a common faith. You want to look up and see why. I mean, there's a whole list on. I go to, there's a place called askmoses.com. It's awesome. And there's either an Orthodox rabbi or a conservative rabbi on. And you can ask Old Testament questions. Like, but like, if you ask them anything about Jesus, I mean, they have whole articles on why Jesus cannot be the Messiah, 100%. And so we're not symbiotic there. It's not, happy kumbaya land. Again, not hating on anybody. It's kind of like why Muslims and Christians, like, we don't have the same faith. It's a different thing. So they're facing some sort of trials. These are believers, because he calls them brothers. So they're believers in Jesus Christ. And so they're facing something. And verse 5 talks, maybe it's a little bit of a hint of this. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously. There's a contrast, too, of lack and generosity. It's only in this paragraph, so it's not repeated through the whole thing a lot. But so maybe they're struggling with wisdom. Maybe they're struggling with, what do I do in a situation? And again, bear in mind, they're people just like us that are in situations that oftentimes, what do we do, right? I jumped the structure. I'm sorry, guys. I didn't mean to jump the structure. I was like looking at I should probably look at my notes. That would be nice sometimes. I'm just going to back up just a second. The structure of James, yeah. It's a sermon. So probably find like where there's different themes. I don't believe there's a division, but I'm looking at the school leaders to make sure I'm not lying. Do you have a division? Do you see one?
It's all over the place.
Yeah, it's kind of all over the place, right? Okay, good. So, but just kind of, sorry, I was going to cover this, and I apologize. I was out of sequence, but it's like try to find where there's hunks of things that kind of talk about the same sort of thing, and that would be the structure. I thought in case you wanted a division, I did sort of see one. At halfway through chapter 5. It'd be very tiny. But yeah, structure-wise, it's really hard to figure out. Some schools, they give you the horizontal. Some schools not. But if you find it difficult, yay! You're right, it is. Awesome. So sorry about that, guys. Okay. I got all excited about the text. I'm like, hold up, I'm supposed to cover one more thing. Okay. So, but what I'm going to do is go through this now, instead of going verse by verse or chapter by chapter, I thought we'd go topic by topic, sort of the thing. So the comparison, we had some comparisons, right? We had the rich and the poor in comparison. All right? Now, just like, have you guys had Hebrews yet? No, okay, then I won't talk about that. That'd be bad. I'm not going to talk about Hebrews. Anyways, there's times when the Jews were facing persecution. Not to mention other books. But there were times when they're facing persecution. And one of the things, when you're suffering, a common thread when you're suffering is to, as we say in America, circle the wagons. I mean, you just kind of close in. And you kind of close yourself off. Because it's self-protection, right? Or if there's somebody that's really rich, and this happens in YWAM, probably not at King's Lodge because you guys are way like Jesus a lot. But other places, not here. Sometimes there can be a tendency for YWAMers, if we meet a rich person, to kind of like say, kind of buddy-buddy with them, like, hi, and tell them, oh yes, and I've led 100 million people to the Lord, and I fast for 3 years, and I'm like way like Jesus, and because you want them to support you. And sometimes, especially for us that are new, when you're first in YWAM, because our finances are always an issue, right? That's what God has called us to, and it's an awesome blessing that sometimes scares you to death, but it's awesome. And but sometimes that can be the tendency. Though we don't face persecution per se, we face trials. And so when you find a really rich person, sometimes you want to be super nice to them because they might help you out, you know. And those of us that have been around a little bit longer understand, A, that God provides through all kinds of astonishing ways, and B, quite often our supporters are those that can least afford it. But anyways, the whole contrast of the rich and the poor. We know that the original reader is facing some sort of trials, and they're facing some sort of testing of their faith. And throughout the book, it talks about, if a rich man comes in, and you say, oh, sit here in this great place, and the poor guy comes in, and, you say sit far, far away. Other times when I've taught this book, if I've known the students, I'll have some of them, I'll bring them cookies and nice coffee, and others, I'm sorry, you sit over there, you don't get anything, this whole thing. But I didn't know you guys good enough to do that, so I thought you might be offended, and that would be bad, a lot. So, but that can happen, and so that's what's happening in the church. It seems like that they're doing this. Why are they doing this? We don't know. There is a common thought in the rabbinical writings, in the Midrash, that if you are wealthy, that is a sign of God's blessing on you, and if you are poor, that is a sign of God's curse on you. I did look that up because I thought, well, there had to be some sort of reasoning. So maybe that's why they were honoring the rich people a lot and treating the poor people like poo. Yes, there's been prosperity doctrines forever. It could be that. Again, we don't know. We're not in the churches. But that was one of the things mentioned in the rabbinical writings. But whatever it is, there's some sort of disassociation. And James is saying, stop it. Basically, he says, stop it a lot. Stop it. Don't do that. Because how many of us know extremely poor, extremely godly people? Right? And how many know extremely rich, extremely godly people? And I know quite a few of those. Yeah. And so it doesn't show a sign of God's blessing or curse on them if they're rich or if they're poor. And the same thing then. If they're suffering persecution from the Jewish sect, or if they're feeling persecution from the Roman Empire, whatever they're feeling persecution, it doesn't mean that they're more or less godly. And James is saying, treat everybody the same. He talks about works. And I'll come back to that because that's kind of a central theme, isn't it? It's kind of a very Jewish thing. It keeps going around the round circle. He talks about works a lot. And it seems like it's in contrast to what Paul was saying. But it's not. Faith, it says, faith without works is dead. Show me your faith, by your works. And I look at it in terms of marriage. Now you can say, there's this person, and you can say, we're married. But you don't talk to each other, you don't live with each other, you don't even like each other. Are you married? No. To be married, there's certain things. You make a covenant relationship. You live with each other. You talk to each other. You have relationship with. There's something with being married. You can't have faith and say, yes, I believe in Jesus, and it's awesome, and Jesus and I were having a great time. But if you don't do anything to show your faith, you can sit in your room and you can pray all day long, 24/7, never leave your room, and you and Jesus are having an awesome time. Meanwhile, the rest of the world is dying and going to hell. Have you shown your faith? Do you have faith? Yes. How do you show your faith? You must do something. Ephesians 2:10, we are his workmanship created for good works in Christ. That's what we heard yesterday. So it's not in contrast to what Paul is saying. But because maybe, like I said, they were facing some sort of trials, they're facing some sort of something, so maybe they were closing themselves off, or maybe they were like showing just preferential treatment, thinking maybe these rich people with their finances will be able to help us, and this sort of thing. And James is saying, no. Show your faith. Jesus showed, right? If we would, one of the differences between Christianity and Mormonism, our daughter and one of our daughter-in-laws, her family are Mormons. And so I thought, well, this is a people group I should know something about. So the Book of Mormon tells you nothing, but the book Doctrines and Covenants is where you really find out the goofy stuff. And the reason they don't have a cross on their churches or inside is because they celebrate the life of Jesus, and they don't want to focus on the negative aspect, his death. And for a long time I sat there going, well, you ask your question, why is the cross important to us? We know why the cross is important to us, but to try to explain it, and I've been a Christian for 35 years, so it's kind of embarrassing that they're going, why is it important? It's like, but it came to me, I had a lot of time in Cambodia to think this summer. So it came to me when I was sitting in Cambodia, it's like, without the death, without the cross, Jesus coming is dumb. Why would the creator of the universe, was he just lonesome someday and decide, hey, I'm going to hang out with people? We're just going to do the people thing and da-da-da. And then at the end, it's time here, then he's just gone. No, he came with that express purpose. It starts in chapter 3 of Genesis. He will, you will bite at his heel and he will crush your head. That's where the plan of redemption comes in. It starts right there, chapter 3. So when you get to Genesis, you can remember that. It's pretty good. Awesome. But it's that simple. So Jesus showed his love for us by dying on the cross. Then he showed his power by raising himself up from the dead. But if he wouldn't have come, that's why he came. It was for the cross. From birth, how much he understood as a baby, I don't know. But by age 12, he knew. He knew his job because he said, I'm about my Father's business. So that's how he showed his love. He didn't just sit there and say all kinds of wise things and then go on and tweedle off, as the Muslims or whatever will say. But he showed it. And so James that's the whole thing. The whole thing about works is like, okay, here's your faith. And he goes through each of these aspects. If you look at this as the central hub, see, I wish we could do like circular horizontals. Wouldn't that be revolutionary thought? No, okay, back then. Okay, so, back. But anyways, but it's kind of like that, right? Because this is the hub. Faith without works is dead. So, and then each of these kind of revolves around that hub. And we'll get to the rest. And of course, for questions, feel free at any time to raise your hand, and I'm okay with stopping or anything like that. So do we have questions about the rich and the poor? Because it shows up sporadically throughout the whole thing, so I didn't want to be going through it all.
He's pretty hard on the rich.
Yes, he does. And there are some doctrines then that have gone on that, yeah, if you're rich, man, you're not like Jesus, which is totally contrary to the others. Flip side, where you're only rich. Yeah, he comes down pretty hard on it. So there must have been some sort of abuse that was going on with the rich and the poor. There must have been. One of the things that you should know about in Jewish, in Leviticus and in Exodus, it's mentioned as one of the big festivals is the year of Jubilee. Every 50th year, if anyone owed a debt, it was forgiven. If they had to sell themselves or their land or whatever, sell themselves into slavery or their land, they were freed and the land was given back to them. So that was supposed to be every 7/7, and then the 50th year was the year of Jubilee. The Jews never kept it. 0 times. Not once. Because, and again, the reason behind keeping it was to say, okay, you know what, God, we're trusting you. We're going to be YWAMers, we're going to throw, on our giving days, right? We throw in everything. I mean, how many of us have sat there at giving days bawling our faces off because people have given wedding rings or they've given, literally everything, literally the shirt off their back. Because it's like, okay, God, you've given this to me, I will give it back. That's how the Jews were, and I'm not hating on the Jews. Please understand that I love them, man. But it's like they were supposed to give everything back because everything came from God, so they'd start from 0 again. But they literally never kept that, and that's why they had to go into exile for the 70 years of exile, because they never kept the year of Jubilee, ever. So I think with the rich. I'm thinking with James with that whole thought, it's like, listen, how did you acquire your wealth? Did you acquire it on the backs of your brethren? Have you given it all back? Because rich people aren't any more evil than poor people. They don't covet money more than poor people. I think YWAMers, we think about money almost more than almost anybody because we pray for it all the time. But it's like, but it does, but I think the concept is, have you given to the poor? Have you taken care of your poorer brother and sister? Have you given out of your excess? Have you sacrificed? The whole thing with works. Have they given? Have they walked out their faith? Yeah, because he does come really harsh on the poor, on the rich, you go. What's that about? But also coming against that whole thing that just because you're rich, the Jewish, again, in the Midrash, it says, if you're wealthy, it shows the blessing of God, and if you're poor, it shows the curse of God. And it actually quotes Job, which that has nothing to do with anything, but that whole thing. I think James is also coming in contrast to that, saying, listen, Whether if you have much or you have little, it doesn't matter. It doesn't show the blessing or curse of God. Yeah. Cool. Any other comments? Yes?
Kind of funny question, but like how we connect with work of faith and rich people, they share or offer support
Uh-huh.
for people.
Right. So how would that relate?
Yeah.
Well, if you have somebody in need, and I'll just take it for us, because those of us in this room, we are richer than 2/3 of the world. If we know that somebody has a need, and we don't do what we can to meet it, how have we walked out our faith? Have we put feet to our faith? I'll give an example. I'm 55, and we go to a church with people they're good, God-loving people, but they believe in retirement funds and things like that, which most people do, and that's very nice. And they ask, and our pastor at one point back, our home pastor, he said, you guys need to set up a retirement fund. I'm like, okay. So I tried really, really hard. But then we have a friend who needs snow tires, and in Montana, you need snow tires, and they don't have any. Now, I have the money that I could give them so that they could get the snow tires on their car. Or I could say, I'm sorry, I have to keep this for retirement. Well, $400 isn't going to do much for the retirement anyways, So it's like, okay, that's the thing. Do we help our brother, or do we say, I'm taking care of myself? Well, they got snow tires. In that instance, we chose wisely. But I mean, that's that sort of thing. It's like, if you have a brother who is in need, if you have someone at your door who is starving, and you're happily inside eating a lovely roast beef dinner with roasted potatoes and Yorkshire pudding and cake with custard on top, and saying, oh man, I'll be praying for you. I'm praying for you, brother. God will take care of you. Be blessed. Or do we put their faith into works and say, come on in, let me feed you. Let me give you some clothes. Let's be practical. Yeah. So I think that's with the rich and the poor. Saying put feet to your money. Yeah. Because it seems like there were situations of quite huge extremes, where people were extremely rich and people were extremely poor, and they weren't being cared for. Yeah. And I know of extremely generous rich people. Actually, I just finished working the Nutcracker Ballet. I still am on staff with the Northwest Ballet at home as a stage manager. And a man who was in the show, and he loves the Lord, but he's a billionaire, like billions. And I'm just like going, wow. But and he wasn't bragging, he was just talking and stuff. He gives away 90% of his money. So there are lots of foundations in our little Flathead Valley that really think he's a great guy. But then also I was struggling with like, okay, you can support. I didn't say that. No, this is like, no, I'm not going to treat him like a bank. But so that sort of a thing. So he's still, when you give away 90% of billions, you still have a fair billion. You're still able to live okay. Like at one point, he designed, in theater world it's a big deal, but he designed the one light that is used in every single theater in the world. And so one time he wanted to test out something, so he rented out how many miles of the Colorado River along the Grand Canyon, because he wanted to see the effect of his lights on the walls of the Grand Canyon. Yeah, that costs a lot of money. I was like, wow, you're crazy rich, but really loves Jesus, and he's a good guy, and he gives away an obscene amount of money. That was the case, and actually, because I knew I was teaching this, I asked him if I could use them. I won't give his name, but I asked him if I could use the story as an example, and he said, yeah. So that's a case where a rich man, he is himself funding major ministries and still living extremely well. He's still rich, crazy rich, But he sees all that he has is a gift from God.